All right, so I'm going to talk to you guys about CSS, which is the cascading style sheet that we're going to add on to our HTML file. So a few weeks ago we had done HTML, which was the content of our web page. We just did one web page. A website would be multiple pages, which you can do down the line for sure, and we'll talk about that. So we're just going to talk about how to make it pretty now. So we'll add some colors and some other stuff that I'll kind of show you how to go about doing things. Resources, again, just like with our HTML, these resources are good for CSS also. Our W3 schools, I use this site a lot. I will reference it here in this tutorial. Code Academy, Free Code Camp, and then of course our LinkedIn Learning, which is accessible via the single sign-on, and you guys get free video tutorials as long as you're a student. During this downtime that you have is probably a good time to use this and just keep learning. Just keep ourselves busy. So the same tools I'm going to use too to write the code in. So we're going to use FileZilla as our FTP client, and then I'm going to use brackets as my code editor. So we'll do that, and again, you can use any old text editor that you like. So if you're already using something that you like, then feel free to continue that. So this is an example of what CSS looks like. So when you're writing code, any code that you're going to be working with is going to have a different syntax. And you've been learning that as long as you're a computer science, computer engineering student. You're learning about different syntaxes, different languages. So this one is using some curly brackets in here. We have different types of selectors that we'll talk about for CSS. Right here in this example, we're using different type selectors. We're using different properties. So if you look at how it's broken down right here, you've got heading 1, and then inside here is the property, and then a value, and then we separate multiple properties and values with semicolons. So we're using a colon in between property and value, and then we're separating semicolon, another property and value. So we can add as many properties and values that you like, as long as you're separating them with semicolons. So this is kind of how the code's written, to give you just a basic idea of how it's coming together right here. So we're gonna write some code today. So we got 3 ways you can insert your styles. You can use an external style sheet, which is what we're gonna do here. We could just do an embedded style sheet here too if we wanted to. The embedded style sheet would be easy for just one page, but the idea behind an external style sheet is if you're going to use multiple web pages and it's the same website, obviously you're going to have a lot of the same different things in there, items in there that you want to style, so there's a consistency to your website. So for example, if you wanted to change like the body background color, body background image, and you wanted to change that on multiple pages, well, if all those pages are using the same style sheet, you can go ahead and just change the style sheet, and whatever's linked to that, all the pages that are linked to that style sheet will then have those changes made. So it's, as you go along and use it, you'll get an idea. You can also be specific to an inline style, so I can actually write style equals inside of a tag in my HTML. So if I wanted to be specific on a particular H1 on one page, I can add that item so it was only specific in that particular page. So that gives me a little bit more control. So maybe I styled all my H1s to be something else, but on that particular page I wanted it to be that. And then just like our HTML, you can validate your CSS. So there's a CSS validator, and you can Google it, the CSS validator. This is the link to get to it. The common things that come into play obviously are colons, semicolons. Maybe you didn't, use the closing angle bracket, things like that. If you're using something like brackets, it kind of changes colors too if you don't, close things out, as we noticed with HTML too. So it's kind of a little helper tool. But if you're staring at it for a while and it just isn't making sense, then it's always nice to be able to use this validator to make sense of it all. So what we'll do is we'll start with the example that we use with brackets. So we have brackets right here, And with brackets, we have the code that we created for HTML. So we just did like a fun little about me page. Hopefully you guys wrote more content than me. This was just kind of my demo page to kind of give you an idea of how to get started, have some fun with it. The more content you have, the more you'll be able to add style to your content, which will be nice too. So I'm going to add a few things. And if you look at the Dropbox for the activity, you'll notice that I want you to create a type selector, or use a type selector, use an ID, use a class, and I'm going to explain, why you may or may not use one or the other, and how to use those items too. So as we go through, hopefully it makes a little more sense to you as we add things too. So let's go take a look real quick at the W3 Schools tutorial. This is the w3schools.com. This is the CSS tutorial. So it has a lot of great examples in here on writing code. And I've showed you guys this before, as you can do it your try yourself window. You can actually change the code in here. This is a great example of just embedding the styles right into the head section, because they're only being used for this one particular page. So you notice we have these beginning and ending style tags. You use these in HTML. I don't need these tags if I'm going to write in an external style sheet, so I wouldn't need those. But if I'm going to put it right straight into the HTML document, then I would use style tags like this. But I'm going to go ahead and use an external. So this gives you a good idea of kind of what it's going to look like somewhat. So we'll go back to brackets. So I'm going to create a brand new file. So I've got a blank slate to get started with, so I would write the body tag. So usually you write your elements, you style your elements in order of the elements within the page, so you look at sort of the parent-child relationship. So the body usually encompasses the whole page, and then whatever items I have in that order, so it's sort of the cascade. If I happen to use the body tag down lower in the CSS, it would actually change the body properties too. So I can do that too, but there wouldn't be any reason to, but things like that. And you can use multiple style sheets too, so that gets a little more complicated. So we're going to keep it simple for now. So with body and with using brackets, we'll get code hints, but notice I haven't given this file a name. So brackets doesn't really know what I'm trying to do yet. So before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and just save it. So I'm going to do a save. And then let's go to the desktop. Okay, so I have this 105 web in here. I'm going to put it in a CSS folder, and then I'm actually going to probably make a copy of the index page too and put that in there. So I'm going to keep this so that I keep my original index, and then I could just do a new modification of it in case I ever want to go back to it or whatever I want to do. I'm not going to do anything too extreme. So we're going to go ahead and put it in here, and then I'm just going to call it main. You can call your CSS file whatever you like, main.css. So again, with file names, remember simplicity is the best thing to do. You can use upper and lowercase, but remember the server is case sensitive. So if you're referencing a file and you're linking to it, you need to make sure that you remembered if you use uppercase M or anything like that. So for me, I just like to use all lowercase, because then I just kind of follow that. And I know that all my file names are going to be lowercase. I don't use spaces. I don't use underscores. Just try and keep things as simple as you can. So it'll help you in the long run for sure. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save that in the CSS folder, and then I can keep doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of this real quick too. So this one is the original one, so I'm going to go ahead and do a save as. So as long as I can have multiple index.html. Remember we talked about index.html being the default file that's looked for in a folder when you're working with web pages. So I can have multiple indexes as long as I put them in different folders, and I'm going to kind of show you this when I FTP all this over, that you guys will see that I'm able to do this with different indexes. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the CSS folder and save it in there. So you can tell in the reference now when I kind of hovered it, it's in the CSS folder. So these are the two items in the CSS folder right here. So I'll go back to that CSS. And then I'll go ahead and start doing some properties in here. So I'll start with these curly brackets right here. And I'm going to add a background color. And you can see they give me some hints here. Background colors, you can use what's called hexadecimal color codes. If you search like hexadecimal color codes, you will see there's charts, but as it's evolved, you can actually use color names. So this is what Brackets has given us for color names. There's all kinds of color names that exist. There's even Dodger Blue that you can use if you're a Dodgers fan, which is kind of fun. So there's all kinds of stuff that you can use in here. So I'm going to do pink. I don't know if anyone would want pink background, but I'm going to do it. So I set up the property with its value with a colon in between, and so the semicolon will then allow me to put the next item. So I can write it all in one big long line if I like, but for me I like to kind of block my code so it makes more sense, so I can go back and see, okay, these are all the properties associated with body, these are all the properties associated with H1, whatever I'm trying to do. I try to just kind of keep them organized and keep them in here. So now I'm going to set up the text color. So I'm going to do a color for the text. And so this is not like text-color. So how do I know what all these are, right? Obviously, I've used CSS for a while. But if you go to W3 Schools, there's a whole reference page. So I'm going to show you this reference page so you guys could go look at these references, because I really want you to explore, have some fun with it, just kind of see what you can and can't do, and, you know, trial and error. That's how we're learning right here. So I'm going to do a color. This one's going to be, I don't know, we could do a dark blue, I guess. Kind of looks like black. Okay, so I can end that here and just make sure I have my bracket here. Just for sort of just in case I want to come back and add another property, I just sort of end it with a semicolon. I don't need a semicolon if I don't have another property there, but that's just something that, you know, I like to do when I'm doing the practicing. So I can do as many spaces as I want in between. So let's say I'm going to do H1 as heading. So these right now that I'm writing are called type selectors. And type selectors work with the actual HTML tags. So there's nothing extra I have to do with a type selector within my HTML for these items to have the styles applied. So anything that's an H1 in my page that I'm referencing the CSS, you know, linking the CSS to, these properties will apply to H1s. Body, it's going to apply to the whole body, whatever I want to do with that. So that's how type selectors work. So that's what we're going to do with these first. So let's just go ahead and finish this one first. So we'll do a font color for H1 of white. And then we'll add our text align. See, I even typed it wrong. It was red. And center. And then we'll semicolon that. Okay. And then let's